Welcome to the very first episode of Welcome to the Table with Pastorey Pasta. What fasting taught me about food, my body, and why I created Dandelion Hills Torchetti. So welcome. This is something I've been wanting to create because I realized that behind every one of my boxes of pasta, there is a story. There are ingredients to learn about, traditions to explore, questions to ask, mistakes to make, and honestly, a whole lot of curiosity. And here, food is about so much more than just what's on the plate. It's about family, it's about gathering and learning, it's about where our food comes from. And sometimes it's about sitting down and asking, what is this food actually doing in our bodies? So that's what this space is going to be. I think of it like you're pulling up a chair to my table. We're going to talk about food. We're going to talk about traditional ingredients. We'll talk about things I've been learning. We'll talk about my family, my business, the mistakes that I've made along the way. And trust me, there are plenty. And occasionally, we'll probably talk about pasta. Okay, let me be honest. We're going to talk a lot about pasta. So today, for our very first conversation at my table, I want to talk about something I've spent the last year learning about and personally experiencing. It's fasting. And more importantly, what fasting taught me about my body, food, and why it eventually inspired the Dandelion Hills Torchetti pasta. Now, before we get started, I want to say this right away. I'm not a doctor and this isn't medical advice. I'm simply sharing my own experience and some of the things I've been learning. Fasting isn't appropriate for everyone, and anyone considering longer or more intensive fasting should make sure it's appropriate for them. This is simply my story. So pull up a chair, let's talk. I've always been interested in food. Obviously, I make pasta, but over time, my interest started going deeper than just what tastes good. I started asking, what is food doing inside our bodies? How are we digesting it? How are we using it? What happens when we're constantly eating? And what happens when we don't? Because let's be honest, most of us live in a world where food is always available. We have breakfast, coffee, snack, lunch, and then something sweet. Then we might snack again because apparently 3 whole hours with no food is not an option. Dinner, something while watching TV, and then we're surprised when our bodies are like, oh my gosh, I am not feeling well. When is my shift over? Or we're tired. And I started becoming curious about the idea of giving my body periods where it wasn't constantly processing incoming food. That's what led me towards learning about fasting. So, okay. I'm going to explain this a way that I understand it. And I'm going to keep it simple because I'm not here to give you a university lecture. When we eat, our bodies break down. When we eat, our bodies break down food into nutrients that can be absorbed and used. When we eat carbohydrates, they're broken down into glucose, which enters the bloodstream. As blood glucose rises, the pancreas releases insulin. I like to think of insulin as a little delivery person. It goes around knocking on the cell doors saying, hey, we've got fuel for you. And insulin helps signal to cells that glucose is available to be taken in and used for energy. The body can use that glucose right away, or it can store it later. I like to think insulin, like I said, that delivery truck person. And it would be like having one delivery person come down your driveway a day or 10. What would you like? What would be more annoying? Would probably be the 10 delivery truck drivers entering your driveway and knocking on your door. The liver and muscles store glucose in the form of glycogen. And when the body has more energy coming in than it needs, insulin also plays a role in encouraging energy storage, including fat storage. Now, I like to think of it this way. Insulin is not the enemy. We need it. It's doing an important job. But when the body becomes less responsive to insulin over time, that's when insulin resistance can become a problem. As I started thinking about how often our bodies are being asked to process food, again, I'm not saying eating frequently automatically causes insulin resistance, but it's those delivery truck drivers coming down our driveway. One a day is okay. Multiples or 10, not okay anymore. Bodies are much more complicated, obviously, but it made me curious. What happens when the incoming food stops? This was part that really fascinated me because your body doesn't immediately go, well, there's no food coming in, everybody panic. Your body is incredibly adaptable. When you stop eating, your body starts changing where it gets its energy from. At first, it can use stored glycogen. As fasting continues, insulin levels generally decrease and the body begins increasing its use of stored fat for energy. And then the liver can produce ketones from the fatty acids, and ketones can be used as fuel for many tissues, including the brain, and it starts to reward the brain. And this was one of the things that I liked about fasting. Your body has this incredible ability to adapt to the fuel that's available. Now, depending on the person and the length of the fast, this transition can happen differently. There isn't one magic hour where everybody suddenly enters some incredible fasting zone. And I think that's important because the internet loves to say things like, at 16 hours, this happens. At 24 hours, everything resets. At 72 hours, you become a completely different person. Biology isn't quite that tidy. Our bodies are all different. What we ate beforehand matters. Our activity level matters. Our health matters. The length of the fast does matter. But the general idea of the body changing fuel sources, that was cool. So over the last year, I started fasting about once a month. And one of the first things that surprised me was feeling hunger. I always assumed hunger would just keep getting worse and worse as my fast went on. 1 hour, I'm fine. 6 hours, still fine. Hour 12, no, I'm feeling the hunger, like get me some food right now. But what I personally noticed was that hunger would come in waves. Sometimes I thought, okay, I am starving. I need to eat now and curl up on the couch and try to just breathe through it. And then an hour later, I was fine. That was interesting. It made me think, am I actually hungry? Or is it just time I normally eat? Is it a habit? Is it emotional? Or is this simply because I wanted a snack? During some of my longer fasts, I personally noticed a different kind of energy. At times, I felt mentally clearer. My hunger changed, and I became much more aware of my body. Now, that's my experience. I'm not saying everyone will have that same experience. I'm definitely not promising that everyone will wake up 24 hours and suddenly solve all of life problems, but it made me pay attention. And I think that's one of the biggest things fasting gave me. It taught me to listen. Another thing I became fascinated with was the liver. The liver is one of those organs we don't think nearly enough about. It is involved in hundreds of essential functions, about 500 of them actually. It helps process nutrients. It helps regulate energy. It stores and releases glycogen, produces bile, processes substances moving through the body. It works with other systems involved in eliminating waste. It just works all day, every day. And I think sometimes we forget that our bodies already have incredibly sophisticated systems in place. We hear the word detox. It sounds like something good we should do. So why not have a detox tea or a detox powder or a detox juice, a detox foot bath? I'm surprised that they don't make socks that you put on that help detox your body. But the truth is, our bodies already have organs and systems responsible for processing and eliminating waste. Your liver and kidneys are already doing an incredible amount of work. Fasting doesn't suddenly teach your liver how to do its job. Your liver already knows what it's doing. But fasting does change the metabolic environment. Instead of constantly processing incoming food, the body shifts towards using stored energy. And that was really cool for me. I started seeing fasting less as I'm not giving my body any food and more of I'm giving my body a different set of circumstances to work with for a period of time. Another thing that caught my attention while learning about fasting was autophagy. Autophagy is one of the body's cellular recycling processes. Cells can break down and recycle damaged, unnecessary cells. And of course, the internet has taken this and turned it into don't eat for 24 hours and your body will clean your entire house, organize your cupboards, and even change the oil in your car. Not exactly. Biology doesn't work on one particular timer. There isn't a giant button that says 24 hours, begin cleaning everything. But our cells do have remarkable maintenance and recycling processes. And fasting may influence some of these processes depending on the circumstances. Again, that's one of the reasons that I became fascinated with it. Our bodies are much more intelligent and complex than we often give them credit for. Over the last year, fasting became something I approached very intentionally. I didn't want it to become a punishment. I didn't want it to become, I ate too much yesterday, so now I can't eat anything tomorrow. That was never the purpose for me. And I didn't want it to become another obsession around food. For me, fasting became a time to slow down, rest, reset, drink water, pay attention, think, and listen to my body. And honestly, summer taught me something. Because when summer came around, life got busy. There were farmers markets, lots of pasta, family, work, everything else was happening. And I didn't realize that I didn't have the time or the space to approach fasting the way I wanted it to. So I stopped. And I actually think that was important because for me, fasting needs to be intentional. I'm not going to fast while running around like a crazy mom, working all day, chasing life, and then tell myself, wow, what a peaceful, healing experience. For me, it needs time. It needs the rest, the intention. And that's why I don't look at it as a weight loss tool. For me, it has become about understanding my body and how I feel as a woman. Eventually, you have to eat again. And this is where pasta in me, the pasta maker, came back into the story. I started thinking, how do I want to break a fast? Because after intentionally taking time away from constantly eating, I wanted to be thoughtful about what went back in. I personally like to start gently, plain yogurt, bone broth, simple nourishing foods. And then I started thinking about my gut. Beneficial bacteria, fiber, protein, nutrients, and naturally, pasta entered that conversation. Because apparently everything in my life eventually needs to be pasta. But what if I could create a pasta based on some of the things I had been learning? Not a miracle pasta, definitely not a detox pasta, not a pasta that promises to fix your entire life, but pasta made with intention. And that's where Dandelion Hills Torchetti came from. The birth of Dandelion Hills Torchetti. I wanted to create a pasta that brought together ingredients I had intentionally chosen. I started with sprouted grains because sprouting has become such an important part of how I think about grains. And it is what my whole line of pasta has become, sprouted. During sprouting, the grain begins the process of germination. And that process can change the grain in very interesting ways. I chose Khorasan because I love this ancient grain and because it naturally has more protein than many modern wheat varieties. I included oats, another ingredient I wanted to incorporate for their nutritional qualities in fiber and taste. Then came dandelion root. Dandelion has a long history of being used as a food and its detoxing properties. And the root contains compounds and fibers, including inulin, that can be used by beneficial gut bacteria. Then came turmeric. I love incorporating turmeric into my food, and it's an ingredient that has been studied extensively for its natural plant compounds. And suddenly I had this idea. What if pasta could be more than just, here's dinner? What if I could look at every ingredient and ask, why is it here? What does this ingredient bring? How can I use traditional processes? How can I make something nourishing? And most importantly, how can I still make it delicious? Because at the end of the day, I don't want food to become stressful. I want food to be nourishing. I want it to be enjoyable. I want to bring people around my table and enjoy it together. I think the biggest thing fasting has taught me is that health isn't always about restriction. Sometimes we get so focused on what we're not supposed to be eating, and what we should be eliminating. Don't eat this, don't eat that, avoid this, never touch that. And suddenly eating becomes a full-time job. For me, fasting actually made me think more about what I wanted to put back in. Nourishing foods, good ingredients, water, rest, movement, sleep, connection, time around the table, and yes, of course, pasta. Fasting made me more curious about my body. It made me more intentional about food. And it made me realize that our bodies are incredibly complex. We don't need to be afraid of food. We don't need to worship food either. For me, both can have a place. And I think the biggest lesson has been learning to pay attention, learning when I need rest, learning when I need nourishment, learning how food makes me feel, and realizing that health isn't usually one thing. It's the combination of many little things we do over time. Well, pasta lovers, thank you for pulling up your chair and coming to my table today. This is exactly what I hope Welcome to the Table with Pastorey Pasta becomes. A place where we can slow down, talk about food, ask questions, learn together, and maybe look at food on our plates in a different way. I'm not here because I have every answer. Honestly, the more I learn about food in our bodies, the more I realize how much I still need to learn. But I am curious, and I hope you'll be curious with me. We're going to talk about sprouted grains, ancient grains, sourdough fermentation, functional ingredients, family, food traditions, building a small family business, and probably a few stories about mistakes I've made along the way. Because trust me, there are plenty of those. Thank you for joining me for the very first episode of Welcome to the Table with Pastorey Pasta. I'm so happy you're here. And I hope that every time you come back to the table, you leave with something new to think about. Maybe a little more curiosity, maybe a little more appreciation for the food on your plate, maybe a new question, or maybe just a craving for pasta. Thank you for being here, pasta lovers. And next time, I hope you enjoyed the meal.